My name is Doug Matichek. This is my final project for process improvement for APPS450 fall of 2019. The agenda I'll go over is the current condition, quantify recommended changes, implement the changes, and key takeaways. So some of the current conditions in which we store files on our computers at work, I've noticed are documents are not labeled in the same manner. Documents are created in different programs. Employees do not know which documents to use. Employees cannot find documents easily within our SharePoint system, and standard documents are not in place. The way some of these things are measured are through motion. Employees are non-value when spending time searching for files, not knowing where to look. Corrections. Employees are entering the wrong data. Reconciliations. Employees are having to go back and enter the correct useful data. Overprocessing. Due to employees using the wrong file or format, they sometimes do additional work than what is required. Time. I did a study on 3 employees just to kind of show the difference from employee to employee. I believe if I were to do this again, I'd probably, or had more time, I probably would have used more than just 3 employees. I think it would actually shown better improvements. Currently spending around 2 minutes and 12 seconds looking for documents. Some recommended changes I would have would be to create standardized documents, create standardized naming formats for files. I would also include a description of to what files are, a little bit more data behind than just naming it, a small description so that people would know exactly what that file is. And lastly, create a central place to put completed documents. In the past, files were here, there, and everywhere. Some of the implemented changes that I did, I revised our SharePoint page. I also implemented standard naming conventions so that all the files are named in the same format. I created a standardized document so that this way everything is always answered the same. And I did create one standardized operating procedure with training. However, this really isn't part of my time trial study, but I believe in the future here I will need to create a couple more SOPs. So this slide kind of explains on what our file library used to look like. This is the before here, where it was just by name in where we kept all our training certificates, and so I just came up with some generic names through here. However, this is kind of being nice because originally when I went into this, it was just kind of some people would just put their initials and then certificate, or they would put their full name, or maybe sometimes they would just put their last name. So it was kind of confusing to search and to find things and to sort things. So I went ahead within our SharePoint site here and made document headers across the top of the columns here that says name, the organization they're in, the certificate that they achieved, and then it automatically, by what they pick for that certificate, it would put the number of years that it's good for, the certification date that they obtained it, and then it automatically puts in, because the SharePoint knows we program that in to when it expires. And then it also has the cutoff date to when that expires, and then if it senses that it is past that date, it's going to flag it with a yes or no. And then, as you can see, this is real easy to look at, because now it's going to go ahead and highlight that name in blue, stating that it has been expired. And so that way this is real easy to look at, versus the old way where everything was just in a file in a folder. Then you had to go through into that folder, actually open it up to view that certificate. So now this way it's real easy to look at and tell when that certification is expired. This was a standard document that I redid. As you could see in the before, employees used to go ahead and print the questions out, and then they used to handwrite either yes or no or NA. They then used to go ahead and sign and date it, and then they used to scan that back in to the computer and save it as a PDF, and then name it anything they thought was respectable to name it as. And as you can see, there's really no direction to this, or you can't tell exactly where it's coming from, or in our case what regulation it's coming from, even though if you looked into it you could tell by the questions that are being asked. So I figured it's almost 2020, it's time to stop doing things by hand, and I went into Excel and I created this after version, and now this form is generated so that when somebody goes in there, a lot of the information I already have set up so that it automatically generates the form for them, tells them exactly what regulation it's coming from, and then they would go ahead and, as you can see, what catches your eye is the yellow boxes, and I always tell them that those are the required fields that they need to fill in. And then if they still don't even understand to what's being asked or required within those fields, I've actually you can't tell from here, but I actually set up little note boxes. If they hover over the questions or the field to what you need to fill in, it'll go ahead and display a little blip of better description of what is being required of that field and how to write it. So then this is, then after they finish, they go ahead and digitally sign and then save it as a PDF back into the file with the new standard naming convention that I came up with. This chart shows the results of the time study that I did on 3 employees. I averaged out the times I kept on them to go ahead and look for certain files. I started them all in the same place, and then I also had them go in and see what the fastest that they could tell me when a certificate has been expired. So obviously when they were looking in the old way, they had to go in and open up that PDF file to see what date the certificate said on it. However, in the new way, like I showed you in the previous slide, they could just go ahead and as soon as they viewed that blue line, they knew it was expired and it had the expiration date right there, so they didn't even have to open up a file. So before seemed to average around 132 seconds or 2 minutes and 12 seconds, and the old way now seems to have brought it down to 28 seconds when looking for a file. So it was a pretty drastic improvement, even though I thought it was going to be even more than that. But like I said in the beginning, I think if I did this time trial on more employees, it would have averaged out to be even a greater difference. Some key takeaways and savings were employees can find documents they need faster. They can also find out the status of those documents faster. Some of the checklists are now computer-based instead of manual. This also, I think back to the goal book, this in the long run kind of improved a bottleneck, and in the long run it improved throughput by employees being able to research and complete these files faster. The average time it took for an employee, like I mentioned in the previous slide, was around 2 minutes 11 seconds. Now that's down to like 28 seconds. This is a savings of 1 minute and 44 seconds per document. So if you took that, if you say 200 documents were being searched for within a week, this would be a savings of over 300 hours per year. That's even probably a little underestimated because there's literally 800 to 1,000 employees within our organizations, so there's probably a lot more than just 200 documents being searched throughout the week. That's all I have for this presentation, so go ahead and be sure to ask any questions or post any other recommendations you may have within the discussion board. Thanks.